To start off, the pandemic has wrought an incredible strain on our NHS and healthcare system as a whole, not to mention the devastating impact on the well-being of nurses and doctors across the country. So I thought we'd start with Amir and Rachel, because you have been on the front line during this time, and I wondered what lessons should we learn and take forward. Amir, as a practicing GP, did you start off feeling like you were literally a rabbit caught in the headlights?
Yeah, Annika, it was really challenging, certainly to begin with. My role as a GP was about not only managing patients with COVID in the community, but also making sure people who had other illnesses were being well looked after as well. So it was a balance between the two. Initially, how we set up red hubs or red sites where we would see patients who weren't unwell enough to go to hospital, but were unwell enough to be seen, and they had a cough and a fever, that kind of thing, so potentially had COVID. At the time, we had no means to test them, so we were just going through clinical symptoms. And I'll be honest, Annika, it was really scary from a personal point of view, going into those clinics, issues around PPE. It was really, really scary. And we were hearing about our colleagues getting COVID, dying from COVID, particularly people from BAME communities as well. And that was really hard. And I remember my very first day at the Red Hub and driving in, and I was really, really nervous. And I'll never really forget that feeling, because I've never been nervous about going into work before. It's always something I've generally looked forward to. So that was difficult. I got over it in time. You get used to things as you do. But the next thing really that was a challenge was we look after a number of nursing homes. We've got a large GP inner city practice, and we look after a number of nursing homes. And COVID hit our nursing homes really hard. And we were in and out of those nursing homes. Patients who weren't being sent to hospitals for various reasons were there. We had to look after them. Again, wearing PPE, which I'm sure Rachel will go into this in a bit more detail, but you have it's a barrier between you and the patient. Normally, when I'm looking after patients who are dying in the community, it's a very kind of personal relationship you have with them, and part of that involves things like holding their hand and talking and giving them, just that kind of connection you have that PPE often stops you from having. The thing I found really challenging about this period really was talking to the relatives of people who had died from coronavirus, particularly in nursing homes. Like I said, we had a large number of people who did sadly pass away. And normally I would be having those conversations in person. At surgery, I would either visit them at home, or I would meet them at the nursing home, or they would come to the surgery. But because many of these people were elderly themselves and were shielding, we had to do it remotely, so either through video call, but many of them didn't have that technology. So it was just done over the phone. And that must have been, it's just not how we're taught to do it. It's not how we're trained to do it. It's not how we want to do it. And that was really tough for both parties. And I think that's had a lasting effect on a lot of these people who probably didn't get the same bereavement support that they would have done had it not been for COVID. I just want to touch very quickly on the point that during the pandemic there were other illnesses going on as well, and we had to make a point of that. We saw, particularly in the first wave, and Steve, you may well mention this, but we saw patients presenting not as frequently as they should have done or used to do for things like cancer symptoms, and we had to actively go out there and really promote the service and say, we do want to see you, and that was a worry. And we saw things like cervical screening numbers go down, childhood immunization numbers go down. All these really important services were impacted by COVID.
Can I just ask, did you feel at any point as the pandemic developed that being an NHS doctor actually made you a target once that wave of sort of collective for that philanthropy just dropped off slightly? Did you feel the public had your back or started to shift slightly?
I think initially they certainly had our back, and it felt like there was a lot of support for the NHS. I think the longer the pandemic went on for, the longer lockdown measures were in place or removed and then put back in, that's when the public started to lose It's only a small proportion of people, I must say, but they were a very vocal bunch of people that felt that we were probably not doing things in the best interest of the general public by locking down, by prioritizing COVID services. And I can certainly understand it from a point of view from the other health services, the other health issues that are going on. The things, particularly patients who are on waiting lists for procedures that have, lengthened and lengthened and lengthened, and they're just left in pain, in anguish. And I'm talking to them every day as well. The thing that's changed everything, I guess, is the vaccination program. And that's been huge for us. Our practice is a vaccination hub. I've been, again, going out to nursing homes. I've been responsible for vaccinating our housebound patients, and that has been just fantastic. It's just the opposite of what happened at the start of the pandemic when I was going around to these people for different reasons, but now it just feels so much more positive, and I am feeling far more positive now than for a long time, really. So I do want to end on that high. The vaccination has, it's changed things. The mood has definitely shifted, and that is important.